Welcome to Part 1A of our ELA Spring Webinar Series. These recordings are based on the spring webinars we hosted in March 2025. The hosted webinars consisted of 2 sessions for grades 3 through 5. To reduce the length of the recordings, we have broken each of these 2 sessions into 2 sections. This is Part 1A in a series that also contains 1B, 2A, and 2B for ELA grades 3 through 5. While we will not be looking at all of the sample release items today, we will be taking an in-depth look at some of them. Please refer to the realigned sample release items on our Assessment Quick Links webpage. New items will be released in the fall of 2025. During our work in this recording, we will examine a 5th grade literary item and a 3rd grade research item. This work is appropriate for all teachers of grades 3 through 5. Let's begin with a 5th grade literary item. Before we look at the item, we must look at the grade level indicators and how they have changed from the 2015 ELA standards to the 2024 ELA standards. Examining this shift will allow us to see any gaps in language and skills. Here, you see the articulation of the 2015 indicator RL 11.2 from grades 1 through 5. You will also notice that in grade 3, RL 11.1 joins the articulation and RL 11.2 drops from the indicators. Another important thing to notice is what is in bold. In the 2015 standards, narrator and characters entered in 1st grade. Points of view and perspectives of the characters and narrator were added in 2nd grade. In 3rd grade, students were introduced to 1st and 3rd person points of view, and students were asked to compare and contrast the reader's point of view with that of the narrator or a character. 4th grade asked students to determine how an author's choice of point of view impacted the text, and 5th grade asked students to explain how the author's choice of point of view impacted how elements in literary text are described. What you should also notice is that point of view and perspective are used interchangeably in 2nd grade, and that perspective is not used again until 5th grade. This is very different from the 2024 ELA standards. Now let's look at the articulation of AOR 3.1 from the 2024 standards before we discuss why this is important for teachers. In 1st grade, students are asked to identify and explain who is telling the story at various points, which implies that a text may have more than one narrator. In 2nd grade, students are identifying the perspectives of different characters in literary text. The main shift here is that in the 2024 standards, perspective is linked exclusively to character. It is important to remember that a narrator may also be a character in a text. In 3rd grade, students are examining and explaining the differences in perspectives between characters and between the characters and the reader. Again, the narrator may be a character in the story. While the indicator does not name point of view may be part of 3rd grade instruction, especially when discussing the narrator. Remember, instruction can go beyond the grade level indicator. In 4th grade, students now move into point of view. Notice that point of view is tied to the author's choice of narrator. Also, we see the addition of sub-indicator B. This is similar to what happened in 3rd grade in the 2015 standards, except here the indicator added additional content instead of changing to a new indicator. In 5th grade, students are expected to do 2 things with literary text. Explain how the point of view from which the story is told includes how events are described, and explain how an author reveals one or more characters' perspectives. This is where the indicators start digging in to author's craft. So why is this important for teachers? It is important for 1st grade teachers to help students identify shifts in who is telling a story and differentiate between narrator and characters, because this will soon build into point of view and perspective. For 2nd grade teachers, point of view is no longer introduced in 2nd grade instruction. It is also very important for 2nd grade teachers to use perspective with characters. A misunderstanding of point of view and perspective can impact students in future years. Remember, in the 2015 standards, perspective and point of view were often used interchangeably. That is not true in the 2024 standards. Again, the focus here is on perspective of the characters, and now the perspective of the reader. It is important because sometimes characters have information the reader does not have, or the reader has information that the characters do not have. Students should begin examining how that lack of information can affect the perspectives of the characters and the reader. In later grades, this will lead to effects such as suspense and irony. In 4th grade, point of view officially enters the language of the indicator. Remember that this is the author's narrative point of view. Also note that there are 2 types of third-person points of view. The indicator does not specifically name one of them, so students should be familiar with both types. In Part B, students continue working with characters' perspectives. This is the 1st grade level where students are working with both point of view and perspective. In 5th grade, students are moving deeper into author's craft, which also ties into the expectations of 5th grade AOR 1.1. Also in 5th grade, we see here in red the skills that carried over from the 2015 5th grade indicator to the 2024 5th grade indicator. On this slide, what is in red is new to the 5th grade indicator, which means it is new to the teacher as well. Again, the focus is on what the author does to show us how a character perceives things within a text. Things could be setting, another character, the events, and himself or herself. This correlates with the expectations of 5th grade AOR 1.1. Now let's look at a sample item aligned to AOR 3.1. This is from 5th grade and was originally aligned to the 2015 grade level indicator. Remember, most of 5th grade AOR 3.1 was present in the 2015 RL 11.1. Here, we are asking students to determine how the author's point of view impacts how the events in the text are described. While the question is not asking students which point of view the author is using, it is important that students apply their knowledge of point of view when answering this question. The student must revisit the text, looking at it through the lens of AOR 3.1. As the student revisits the text, he or she may notice sentences like the ones shown here. What the student should be able to determine through these sentences is that he or she can see the actions of Tim, Stan, and Sammy. We only know what the grandfather said because Tim remembers the advice that fear is only as deep as the mind allows. This means the reader can see the actions, thoughts, and feelings of Tim. This is where it is important for students to understand the difference between the two types of third person. Tim is the main character in the story, but he is not telling the story. Therefore, this cannot be a first-person narrative. Because we can only see the thoughts and feelings of Tim, and Tim is not telling the story, this must be a third-person limited point of view, meaning that the all-knowing is limited to one character, and that is Tim. So what does this mean for teachers? Fifth grade teachers should formatively assess their students early in the year to determine if students understand the different narrative points of view. If they do not, teachers will have to go back and reteach how to identify those points of view. However, this is not where instruction will live because the expectation for students at the end of fifth grade is well beyond identifying points of view. Fourth grade teachers must support student learning in the different types of point of view and the difference between point of view and perspective. How do you know if students can answer questions like this one? Make them show you in the text. Have them pull out the sentences that show them the correct answer. If they are unable to do so, then they don't understand point of view. Although the next sample item is a third grade item, the skill being assessed in the item is relevant for students in grades 4 and 5. This item has been realigned with our 2024 standards. This sample represents what an item could look like for Research 1.1 in third grade. Ask and answer questions about print and non-print sources to narrow or broaden thinking about a topic for inquiry. The process of research looks very different in action than it does on a summative test. In action, the students would be working with the teacher to create research questions that will produce enough information to learn more about the topic. In summative assessment, we present possible research questions to the students. In this specific question, the students should focus on the phrase, "more information about kangaroos." This signals to the student that they are trying to broaden or expand the research topic on kangaroos. When students look in the provided paragraph, they see basic information. Large mammal, lives in Australia, have large feet for jumping, powerful legs and tail also help them jump, and they live in small groups. Here you see the sample question on the left and the indicator being targeted on the right. This indicator is not much different from the 2015 indicator, Inquiry 1.1. Remember, research is a process, and the process looks very different than a summative test item. If the classroom focus is only on answering multiple choice research items, the students are not learning how to research. They are learning how to take a test. Because this is a multifaceted indicator, summative assessment can only assess it in pieces. We cannot target this full indicator with one multiple choice test item. In blue, you see the primary part of the question and which part of the indicator is being targeted. This also indicates that other assessment questions can target the other part of this indicator as seen in white, and still aligned to Research 1.1. This means there is more than one way to target this indicator on summative assessment, and not all questions will be the same. Again, here is the important part of the question that students must notice to be able to select the correct answer. The correct answer will relate to what we mentioned earlier: large mammal, Australia, large feet to jump, powerful back legs and tail to jump, and live in small groups. Option B asks about keeping kangaroos as a pet. There is nothing in the paragraph about kangaroos being pets. The paragraph is about kangaroos in the wild. This information does not fit within this paragraph. Option C moves away from kangaroos and focuses on other animals. This does not provide us with information that will fit in the provided paragraph. Option D mentions that kangaroos jump, which is in the paragraph. However, Option D also mentions other types of animals. Our question must focus on the topic of kangaroos. The paragraph ends with information about how kangaroos live in small groups. Option A asks why kangaroos live in small groups. This information aligns with our topic and adds additional on-topic information. As you noticed in the sample item, the student took the information about a topic, wrote a paragraph, and then wanted to expand on that information. This shows us that research is not a skill that lives in a vacuum. For a student to retrieve the information, he or she must read, which aligns with several of our AOR standards. Since this is third grade, the research process will be guided by the teacher. In the case of kangaroos, the teacher would provide the student with several texts, video, audio, and/or pictures about kangaroos. This would be the initial source of information. Instruction at this stage would be to extract information from those sources to use in the next stages of research. If this process begins with teacher-provided sources, extracting information from the sources, note-taking, highlighting, guiding questions, writing an informational piece, revising the written piece, and presenting or speaking about the topic, then all of these indicators will be addressed throughout that process. This combines multiple indicators from several strands and allows students to collaborate with one another during the process. The sample item illustrates the cognitive target of the grade level indicator. By working backward from the item, teachers can create instruction that ranges from lower cognitive levels to the cognitive level of the indicator. If we only use this item as a practice item with students, the students will only be prepared to answer one type of assessment question. However, if we teach the research process, students will learn how to apply the skills in this indicator and in others. This also allows students to see that research is not an isolated skill. It requires reading and writing. If a student can successfully work through the process, then a test question like this one won't be difficult. If you have not used the assessment specifications document for your grade level, you are missing out on important information. These documents break apart each of the assessed indicators and explain how we assess them on SC Ready. These documents are housed with our test blueprints on the Assessment Quick Links for Teachers webpage. To learn more about how the assessment specifications work, there is a video available on our Quick Links webpage. This QR code will take you to that page. Part 1B of this series for grades 3 through 5 will continue working with the grade level indicators and making instructional connections between the sample release items and instruction. Parts 2A and 2B focus on the TDW item. Thank you for watching this recording.